Hello, I'm Lucy.
And I'm David.
Welcome to Tudoriferous, the biographical podcast that examines lives in the Tudor era.
And today, Thomas Grey, the first Marquis of Dorset, Part 2. Yeah, this is the person I was absolutely convinced would only have one episode, and I've just about fitted him into two, on the assumption that we will do more on his son and his wife, and probably some of his other children next series.
Well, yeah, welcome to our world, yes. And the more we do, the longer they get.
Oh dear. And in fact, one thing that I'm going to warn both you and our listeners is this is probably best followed occasionally looking at some family trees. I mean, mostly I'm going to try and make it clear. So if we go back, I just wanted to mention before we start, last time I talked about his relationship to the poor, hapless Richard Grey, Thirlord of Kent.
I was just listening to his episode, actually, and thinking, oh, blimey, if he had, if he did have mental issues, it's desperately sad. I mean, it's sad on either, whatever his problem was.
Well, I described him last time as Dorset's second cousin once removed, and he was on the paternal side.
Right.
But just to show what these family trees are like, his mother, Richard Grey's mother, was Anne Woodville, the younger sister of Elizabeth Woodville, mm-hmm. So they were also first cousins on the other side.
I just wait till we get to Juana. I mean, she's the start of the really complex Habsburg spaghetti.
So yes, he had two lots of this family on both sides. Didn't help him much. But then again,
didn't help Richard Grey either, did it?
No, as a general rule, things are not going well for these people. So, previously on Tudoriferous. Born the son of a Leicestershire knight, Thomas Grey went significantly up in the world when his widowed mother married the new king, Edward IV. He married two incredibly wealthy heiresses, not at the same time, collected a series of offices and marriage rights, and was made Marquis of Dorset, meaning he technically outranks almost everyone in the kingdom, apart from the king, the queen, and a handful of dukes. Now, sure, his life hadn't quite taken off. Military glory eluded him, and even as a jouster, he never quite hit the top level. But it's early 1483. He's around 30. He's got a growing family, plenty of prestige. Yeah, plenty of prestige and influence at court, and a rosy future to look forward to.
Yeah. We do this all the
time. Yeah, and then King Edward IV died.
That is always the pivotal moment. And then Edward died. And for some people, suddenly they go whoosh and they're up. And then suddenly, for most people in our story, they suddenly think, oh, how?
Yeah. Well, let's be honest. If he hadn't died, if he'd lived, to the age his father did, his 60s, and bear in mind his father also died violently, then, I don't think Tudoriferous would exist.
Yeah. No. And he was a good king. He did well.
He was, as long as you weren't a woman he had his eye on. No. Well, that worked out well occasionally.
Yeah.
well, once. Not so well for everyone else. But anyway, that is over because it's now time for the glorious reign of King Edward V. Poor lad.
Yes. He got his own Rex Factor episode.
Well, he was definitely king. So I had to go a bit academic at this point, but I think just before we get into this, it's time to just get a little bit into the historiography, because the next few months are some of the most debated in history.
Yeah, I can't wait to leave this behind.
So, by the end of it, we know a few things. We know that Edward V was deposed, and that he and his brother, Richard, Duke of York, disappeared into the Tower of London and were never, for certain, seen again. There are theories, but officially. We know that on the orders of Richard, Duke of Gloucester, and Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, Dorset's uncle, Earl Rivers, and brother, Sir Richard Grey, and stepfather-in-law, Lord Hastings, were all killed with various levels of legality.
Wow. Were there various levels? It's none all the way through, isn't it? Actually,
I think
we looked and discovered that Hastings might have been...
Yeah, Hastings might have been legal, and The other two had a trial.
They did, but the actual judge would refuse to touch it with a barge pole, didn't they? They had to wheel in Henry Percy, who'd said, yeah, I'll do it, don't worry, I'll sort it.
Yeah. We know that at the end of it, Gloucester was crowned as King Richard III,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that Queen Elizabeth Woodville took her daughters into sanctuary at Westminster Abbey, along with Richard Duke of York, and that probably Dorset joined them there for a short time. But apart from that, nobody agrees.
No.
Not even at the time. We have sources, of course, but because Richard's reign was so short, and therefore he was, if anything he was saying was kind of trying to shore up his own reign, they didn't have, if there'd been a 30-year reign of Richard III, there might have been time to look back. But all the bias is pretty extreme. We've got royal proclamations, which of course calls Richard a true monarch and his enemies scheming, disreputable rebels. We have the histories and chronicles, but they all come out during the Tudor period. So naturally they call Richard a depraved child murderer and niece botherer. and we have rumours. So many rumours.
And yet people must have known. So many people must have known. I mean, some of these characters we do, you just want to shake them and say, for God's sake, you know for certain. Just tell us.
Well, the sad thing is that, again, if it had been 60, 70 years later, when a lot more people are literate and the printing presses are just flying, that's why we get all the rumours from Elizabeth I's era all written down. And of course, the trouble is, those with real access, who know, as you say, who know what's happening, they all have vested interests.
Yeah.
They all want to present their allies in the best light, or their patrons. And those who don't have access, don't have access.
Just make it up.
So you've got the Italian friar Domenico Mancini, who's one of our best sources from this period, and because he wrote an account of these events. I apologise, Umberto. The Occupazioni Regni Angli per Ricardum Tertium, which was written contemporarily for Angelo Cato, Louis XI's doctor, and it gives us an excellent account of what people were gossiping about at the time, but without close access, it's just he's essentially getting his info down the pub.
And I'm not sure, he didn't speak English or something?
It's really not all that well. He keeps saying, people say this.
Yeah.
And so
well, that's fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing for reporting, what the gossip was, which is in itself a really valuable historical source.
Yeah.
But the only person he seemed to actually have access to was Edward V's doctor, John Argentine, which makes sense if he was the servant of Louis XI's physician. They're kind of, in the doctor connection. And obviously, presumably, Argentine spoke Latin.
Yeah.
If he was a doctor. But even this gets us no closer to whether the princes died of natural or unnatural causes. All we know is that John Argentine says that Edward was ill, but we don't know what happened after that. So we know what people did, but motivations and personality, that's what we are going to have to go into and do what everyone else does, which is to speculate.
Yes. Yeah. Philip de Comines was adamant that Richard had killed them.
Yeah, and again, great source in a totally different country.
Yes. And answerable to Louis XI and Charles VIII.
Yes. So, for example, Lord Hastings. We know he turned on the Woodville Grey family as soon as King Edward died. And we know this from Mancini and from the Crowland chronicler, who was probably on Edward IV's council, but his chronicle might have been continued by an ally of the Tudors or the Woodvilles after the change back into the Tudor period, so, be a little careful with him. Now, they agree that Hastings and Dorset despised each other, but the exact reason isn't so clear. So Crowland claims that Hastings wrote to Richard, Duke of Gloucester, to warn him about Woodville machinations, because he was afraid this overmighty family didn't like the personal slights Hastings has done them. And to be fair, if you remember last time, their relationship hadn't got up to a great start.
Yeah, he tried to trick Elizabeth into selling off her children, effectively.
Yes. And then got very annoyed, of course, when they immediately break that pledge.
Here, marry my invisible daughter.
Yes. Oh no, I think we'll marry your very wealthy stepdaughter instead. It only got worse over the years. Apparently Hastings and Dorset's uncle, Earl Rivers, had both wanted to be Lieutenant of Calais. Rivers claimed that Hastings would betray Calais to the French, and Hastings fired back by torturing a man called John Edwards until he made some very serious allegations against both Rivers and Dorset.
Right.
Annoyingly, because these allegations were retracted, presumably when John Edwards was let off the rack, we don't actually know what these allegations were, but, you know, they were serious enough to get a proper inquiry. So it shows that Hastings saw the whole family as the problem, because Dorset hadn't even been in the conversation until this point, but Hastings made sure to bring him in.
Well, you can see why Dorset wasn't keen on him then.
Yes, exactly. But then again, as we say, this was written in the early years of Henry VII's reign, so, of course, anyone siding with Richard III has to be in the wrong. But Mancini, who does, I think, like the gossip a bit more, claims that they were at odds for a much more personal reason. Quote, the mistresses they had abducted or attempted to entice from each other.
Isn't there's a barmaid or something, isn't there? Have I got the right people?
Oh, we're getting
Right, okay. Suddenly flashed into my mind. Hang on, barmaid, I remember.
We are about to talk about Elizabeth Shaw.
Yeah. Yes.
So later, an official proclamation from Richard III would claim that Dorset had slept with Elizabeth Shaw, who was a notorious mistress of Edward IV. And later on, Thomas More, in his history, conflates these two claims together to suggest that Shaw was the same mistress that Dorset had enticed away from Hastings as well.
Right.
Which, if true, not only suggests...
She's a very friendly lady.
She's a very friendly lady. But also it means that Dorset was pursuing a woman who had slept with both his stepfather and his father-in-law. Yeah. It's all getting rather Oedipal here. What does seem true, I mean, is that Richard was convinced that Mistress Shaw was linked to one of his enemies. And so the poor woman was publicly shamed and thrown into prison.
Well, she hadn't actually done anything, has she? I mean, she'd done nothing illegal.
She'd just been... Well, I mean, she'd done something illegal in church court terms for being a kind of harlot, but it meant that she was paraded through the streets in just her shift.
Yeah.
But, yes, not in sort of civil law terms, or certainly not criminal law.
No.
And indeed, if we believe Thomas More, which, I mean, he's second, third-hand stuff here, she was the one who didn't demand anything from him and was actually really nice and sweet and everyone liked. Anyway, she had the last laugh because she actually remarried, Shaw was dead by this point, Richard III's Solicitor General, Thomas Lynham, who fell in love with her whilst she was still locked up in prison. To the extent that Richard literally sent a letter saying, are you sure about this? Or maybe, I say love, maybe he'd just been watching her walking through the streets in her linen shift.
Yes.
And she ended up outliving the whole lot of them, dying in the 1520s.
Good for her.
Yes. Thomas More writes about her rather sympathetically, although apparently he says she did end her days in penury. But still...
Well, he wasn't in penury, he could have helped her out.
Indeed, good point. To be honest, whilst Hastings, may well have had extramarital affairs, I mean, Henry VII was seen as odd for not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the more you come across other people, the more you realise he was a paragon of virtue, wasn't he, our Henry?
Yes, exactly. There are rather more indications that Dorset was a bit notorious for this.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna reuse a quote that you used in your episode on Edward Woodville because it's so good. Mancini said of Edward IV that although he had many promoters and companions of his vices, the most important and especial were relatives of the Queen, her 2 sons, and one of the brothers. And again, if that is true, that is his stepdad.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's encouraging his stepdad into vice.
I mean, they were...
Maybe they thought it was quite funny. I mean, old drunken fool. Let's set him up like a stag do or something.
I mean, they were, about 12 years apart in age, maybe? So it's like maybe a little more than that. But it's like, so it's possible he could have seen him slightly more as a big brother. Anyway, when Dorset rebels, Richard III went out of his way in his royal proclamation to say that Dorset hath many maids, widows, and wives, damnably and without shame, devoured, deflowered, and defouled. Which, apart from showing Richard has a taste for alliteration,
Yes.
would be an
Defouled.
Yes. And that would be an odd detail to focus on if it didn't have a ring of truth. I mean, or at least a familiar rumour. I mean, surely the treason aspect would have been enough otherwise.
Well, I suppose he's dragging him through the mud, isn't he? He's getting
Yes.
getting as much scandal as possible.
I mean, on the other side, Dorset, as far as we know, had no illegitimate children. Unlike his son, but we'll come to that next series. But Thomas More suggests that Elizabeth Shaw was imprisoned not for her lewd behaviour, but because Richard believed she was secretly conveying messages to Elizabeth Woodville in sanctuary. But Melita Thomas, in her absolutely invaluable House of Grey, suggests that it'd be a bit more likely she was bringing messages not to Elizabeth, who she probably wasn't on great terms with, unless you believe, that story that they were doing witchcraft together, but to her lover, Dorset. Which does make a little more sense.
And it implies that he was definitely there in sanctuary.
Yes. Honestly, Hastings might have disliked Dorset because he'd betrayed and embarrassed his beloved stepdaughter. But, I don't know, a multi-way love triangle's more fun to gossip about, I suppose.
Yeah.
Whatever the case, Thomas More also claims that Edward IV called for Dorset and Hastings to make up while he was on his deathbed, which went about as well as these love days ever do.
Especially when the person instigating it isn't going to be there to make sure you get on with it.
Yeah. And Hastings definitely supported the imprisonment of Rivers and Sir Richard Grey, although whether he'd have gone as far as executing them is another matter, but by the time they were executed, he was already dead. Then there's the question of Dorset's political behaviour in this period. So, as half-brother to the new king, Edward V, and a marquis, Dorset was naturally put on the ruling council to convene to run the country in Edward V's minority. And from the second it convenes, there seems to have been a bit of confusion over the extent of its power. Was it supposed to be a ruling council, with Richard, Duke of Gloucester as its most senior member, but still one voice among many? Unsurprisingly, that was clearly the option that Dorset preferred. Or was Richard supposed to be Lord Protector or even Regent, and the council was more like the King's Privy Council? And that seems to have been Hastings' position. Edward IV's final codicil to his will might have made that clearer, except for two things. One, some people claim he changed his mind on his deathbed, giving Richard significantly more power as protector of the realm. And two, that bit of his will is lost, so how do we know?
And who would have been around to jot it down? I mean,
definitely not Richard.
You'd have thought that it's going to be the Woodvilles.
Probably. Remember, Hastings was Lord Chamberlain, so he would have been there all the time.
Yes. That's him then.
Yes. Anyway, the council seems to have decided that Richard should be protector, but only until his nephew's coronation, which they arrange very rapidly.
May the 4th, wasn't it? For some reason, that date sticks in my mind.
Well, yeah. Although some members say they really shouldn't have started the council without Gloucester. I mean, whatever his role, he was the most senior nobleman in the land. But it's at this point that Dorset says the one line we know he said during this council. We are so important that even without the king's uncle, we can make and enforce these decisions. And because Dorset has so few things written about him directly, so much about him depends on how you interpret that line.
And it's we, isn't it? We, meaning the family.
Well, that's it. Yeah. A pro-Richard view absolutely sees the we as the family. It's a power grab on behalf of the Grey Woodville family, dismissing the rightful family of York for a new king who's been entirely educated and guided by their faction, and with Dorset arrogantly making it clear who holds the power now. Now, this view certainly isn't helped by the fact that Dorset had made a couple of rather suspicious-looking moves in the months before, taking over as Deputy Constable of the Tower of London, and preparing to gather troops with his uncle Edward Woodville for a fleet of 4 to 6 ships, of course, because that's a fleet.
Yep.
But if you change the inflection slightly, we are so important that even without the king's uncle, we can make and enforce these decisions, as in the council.
Oh, yeah.
Then it's a call for unity. A reminder that although Gloucester's a powerful lord, he is not the king. Mm-hmm. And it's the job of the council to prepare the way for a new king. I mean, this is not like Henry VI, who was 9 months old. Edward is 12. And people, people are fighting on the battlefield in 1516. Sorry, not in 1516, at the age of 15 or 16. I mean, they are fighting on the battlefield in 1516, but that's totally irrelevant. In this reading, the council is sovereign, not the Greys and the Woodvilles.
Yeah, I saw it instantly as he was being smug and a bit incendiary.
And it's important to illustrate that sovereignty by saying we can make decisions without Richard. Particularly remembering that the last time there had been a long minority, there had been a Duke of Gloucester in charge, Humphrey Duke of Gloucester, and he'd made himself extremely unpopular with the nobles by being, rather overmighty.
To the point where they decided that his wife was a witch.
Yes, indeed. And then he happened to die.
Yes. Yeah, it does happen.
Yes.
It happens to happen.
Yeah. And of course, there's also a third reading. And this is my preferred reading, because I have a tendency to assume that people are generally just not very good at thinking ahead or very good at their jobs. And that he meant it in the uniting way, but it came out sounding the arrogant way. And it turned everyone against him.
Yeah, that's the way I can hear him speaking. That he's quite privileged. A little overprivileged, maybe. So, yeah.
Especially if people were, suspicious of the Woodville Grey faction and, were inclined to hear it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it's written down,
Yes.
What are you meant to think?
Exactly. Certainly, his other behaviour is easily explained away. He'd taken charge of the tower when no one thought Edward was going to die, and it was just another of the roles he took on, probably basically for the salary.
Well, he's not going to do the job, is he?
No, absolutely. No one ever does.
Get your hands dirty doing that.
And as for him and Uncle Edward raising troops, well, remember, before his untimely death, Edward had been preparing for another invasion of France.
He'd been told to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, this invasion, Gloucester would have been absolutely behind. Because, he'd been very frustrated that Edward had signed a peace treaty previously. Richard would also later accuse Dorset and Queen Elizabeth of emptying the royal treasury. But, yeah, we've said this before, but according to the research of Rosemary Horrocks, the royal treasury was about 3 farthings and a piece of string. Because Edward had spent all his money on raising those troops. There wasn't even enough to pay for his funeral. So, yes, they had taken money from the treasury on Edward IV's orders.
Yeah, and Richard's rather good at that sort of thing, isn't he? Yeah. And look, she withered my arm. I think, what, all of a sudden?
Yes. And also, we've got your skeleton now, Richard, and you may have had scoliosis, but your arm was fine. Yes.
Perhaps she gave him a half Nelson or something.
I can see that.
Yes.
The only way I can make sense of all this, without turning, as most people seem to want to do, to turn someone into a Machiavellian monster, is everyone's just fallen victim to rampant paranoia. No one was expecting Edward IV to die. Everyone decides to think the worst of their rivals and get their retaliation in first. Richard was just the most successful.
Yeah, yeah.
So whatever Dorset was intending to do, it collapses when Richard arrests his brother and uncle and takes possession of the young king. So he might have gone into sanctuary at this point after he and his mother tried to raise troops in London and fail, because we know how fickle the Londoners are. So he'd have been crammed into these tiny rooms with his mother, all of his half-sisters, and his remaining half-brother, perhaps taking the time to ask his mother why she had to call 2 of his younger brothers Richard and make this part so confusing.
I hadn't heard of that before.
Mother, Richard has just arrested Richard, and now he wants to take young Richard from us. Why couldn't you give him a less common name, like Thomas?
We come across the odd Jaquetta and more so in women's names. The men's names are incredibly samey, aren't they? I mean, when you come across Giles Lord Dobney, I noticed when on the song actually, Rob, my partner, had written Charles Lord Dobney because he obviously thought, well, it can't be Giles. There's no Giles.
I remember there was a conversation about this in one of the history podcasters groups on Discord, and I think someone was mentioning how we're still in the era where people, although they do have surnames, they're still in the tradition of the earlier period. People didn't really use their surnames, so they often named their children after themselves almost as a way of carrying on the family line. And they did it for multiple sons, often because they didn't know which ones would survive.
Yeah.
And you know, people often had middle names that they would use if necessary. I mean, you know, that's why if you think of all the kings, the French kings called Louis, like Louis the 16th, Louis the 18th were brothers, but they, and it's a bit later, but they weren't both known as Louis in their life when they were at the same time. You know, I think Louis the 18th, his name was actually Louis Stanislaus.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so
the John Pastons were particularly weird in the fact they called each other John Paston.
Yes. But, you know, if he was in Sanctuary, he knew that he couldn't really do anything there and it would just delay the inevitable. So he slipped away. And he did, if he was there, he did manage to slip away. I mean, he didn't take his mother or sisters with him, but that would have been a lot trickier to do.
He probably said, I'll go and get help. I'll be back soon.
Yes. Alternatively, he might have already been with Uncle Edward on his 6 to 4 ships in the Channel.
Well, anything more than that's an armada, surely.
Yes, true. Anyway, whatever happened, Richard III wanted him back, and ideally headless. So he offered a reward of 1,000 marks in money, or 100 marks in land. Presumably that was seen to be more reliable for his capture.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge difference, though, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose you get 1,000 marks in one go, or you get land worth 100 marks. It's like, you know, when you get those prizes, do you want 20,000 now or 2,000 a year for the rest of your life? You know, it's that.
Yeah.
I'm picturing him on one of those Wild West wanted posters at this point.
Except for the alive bit.
Yes. Wanted dead or... No, just dead.
Just dead.
Definitely dead. Anyway, at first, he joins the Buckingham Rebellion. He raises troops in Exeter, and he prepares to link up with Buckingham, and presumably they weren't going to mention the whole arresting and execution of his brother and uncle thing.
No.
But that collapses before Henry Tudor can arrive to help, so it's time to flee again.
Yeah, they weren't that far apart either. It's just Buckingham couldn't get over the River Severn.
Yeah, and then his head was taken off. So, now it's time for the real tale of Daring Do, the escape to Brittany. And fortunately, the Great Chronicle of London tells us about this, saying that Dorset, quote, escaped many wonderful dangers, whereof, if I should tell all the circumstance, it would make a long book.
Make a long book. Please make a long book.
Yes. That's it. Nothing. Nada. Next time we hear about him, he's joined Henry Tudor in Brittany.
Yeah, we get that so often, though, suddenly it's almost as if some sort of portal that they go through and they suddenly appear in Brittany.
Again, this is the almost man. Yeah. Almost had a really exciting... Probably did. Probably did.
But they all did, but we never hear about them.
Turns up, you know, burned with dragon fire. So he's joined Henry Tudor in Brittany just in time for Pierre Landais to get cold feet about the whole supporting the Lancastrians thing and try to hand them back. Maybe his adventures are particularly wearying because he doesn't manage to escape up to France along with Henry at first, and he has to wait for relations to shift again before he can join Henry in Paris.
There were very few went with Henry, I think, weren't there? I mean, it really was galloping off into the night. Most of them were left behind. Maybe
Dorset's going, I've just done that, give me a second.
He's there bent double with his hand on his like a...
So this must have been an awkward couple of years. First, Dorset had to ally himself with Buckingham. And then, you know, perhaps there's no wonder we don't see him playing a major role, because he learned he'll just say the wrong thing and he'll get taken out and be executed. And then there's Henry. So Henry is now the head of the resistance, the Ricardian regime. So obviously he's the person Dorset has to join forces with, but... I mean, they don't know each other.
No, I mean, I always think, why are they there? What, all these people, why are they there? And I suppose he is the only resistance, but they must be thinking, who is this man?
And Henry's got some very loyal men with him. He's got Uncle Jasper.
Yeah.
He's got the Earl of Oxford, who was always 100% pro-Lancastrian. And thanks to his mother, he knows he's got a reasonable chance of getting at least one of the Stanleys on side. And that's a huge force.
Yeah. Although, ironically, it seemed it was the other one, the other brother who took the initiative. There's Margaret going, go on, Thomas, go on.
Yes. Now, Dorset's probably most useful as a piece of propaganda. You know, he's the brother of Elizabeth of York, the son of Elizabeth Woodville. He's a symbol of this York-Lancaster alliance that Henry Tudor is building. But as a practical help or reliable ally, Henry had every reason to doubt him. So at first, Dorset seems to be doing the right things. We see him sending his man, Roger Machado, the Leicester Herald, to visit some of his relatives, Jacques of Savoy and Jacques of Luxembourg.
Okay, all the Jacks.
Yeah, presumably to ask for aid, though he doesn't get anything, and whether it was for Henry or himself,
yes,
that's kind of hard to say.
Could you protect me, please? Otherwise I'm stuck with this loser.
Yeah. Well, gradually he's accepted into the fold, and he certainly must hear a few of their plans for invasion. And then he tries to run back to England.
Yes. Now, do we know why? Was he taking information back? Is he a turncoat?
Oh, never have I more longed for a private letter in which Dorset sets out exactly what he was thinking here. So according to Polydore Virgil, Elizabeth Woodville had sent him a letter calling him back to England, saying she had reached an accommodation with Richard III. And she kind of had, actually. I mean, Richard had promised to pardon her brother, Richard Woodville, and allow him to become the next Earl Rivers, and then he did. And Richard had even agreed to a very long list of demands before she would bring her and her daughters out of sanctuary. Quote, this is what Richard had to sign. I promise and swear that if the daughters of Dame Elizabeth Grey, late calling herself Queen of England...
Yeah.
I like that little jab there. That is, to wit, Elizabeth, Cecily, Anne, Catherine, and Bridget, will come unto me out of the sanctuary of Westminster, and be guided, ruled, and demeaned after me, then I shall see that they shall be in surety of their lives, and also not suffer any manner hurt, by any manner person or persons, to them, or any of them in their bodies, or persons to be done by the way of ravishment or defouling. He likes that word.
He's big on defouling.
Yes. Contrary to their wills, which is a nice little note, unless they wanted, I suppose. Nor them or any of them in prison within the Tower of London, or other prison, but that I shall put them in honest places of good name and fame, and them honestly and courteously shall see them to have all things requisite and necessary for their exhibition and findings as my kinswoman, and I shall do marry such of them as be marriageable to gentlemen born, and one of them give them marriage lands and tenements. And it goes on, but you get the point.
Richard does go on. I mean, they all do at this time, but I find Richard by far the hardest to read.
But what I love about it is how many things Elizabeth has clearly said. So you're not going to put them in prison. I won't put them in the Tower. You won't put them in any prison. Okay, I won't put them in any prison. And I'll marry them off to gentlemen. Yes, all right, to gentlemen. Yes. And they'll have dowries.
Gentlemen cover quite a wide range of levels of nobility, don't they?
So yeah, clearly she thought if she hasn't covered every loophole.
Yeah, she's taken legal advice there, hasn't she?
So you think about Dorset's position here. Like, again, you got to remember, Richard is 31. He's about the same age as Dorset. So as far as he's concerned, he'll probably reign for a really long time. He's already seen off one rebellion. Henry and his men are frankly nobodies. They're drifting back and forth between different royal courts. French support would hardly make him popular in England, and with Louis XI now dead, France was ruled by an unknown quantity in the form of Anne de Beaujeu. I mean, who even knew if she would let Henry leave? I mean, yes, technically Charles VIII, but let's be honest, Anne de Beaujeu. Yeah.
I wonder how often Henry had to see that expression, that look.
That look.
Yes. So when am I getting these troops, Anne? No, it's okay. You're obviously busy. I'll come back later.
Dorset's family has made accommodations with their enemies before, and frankly, he's always done what his mother has told him to do, and she's usually been right.
Yeah, they usually are.
And then there's his wife and children. You know, he would have known what had happened to Elizabeth Shaw, so he knew that Richard wasn't above going after the women in his life. So his wife Cecily and the children weren't targets yet, mainly because most of their lands were actually held in her name, not his. So Richard couldn't technically deprive her of the lands unless she acted against him, rather than her husband.
He couldn't claim that she was dead like he did with his mother-in-law.
Well, exactly. Richard hasn't always been playing by the rules, and You leave it a few more years, Richard would have the power to marry off Dorset's children to whoever he liked. I mean, Dorset knew that trick well. He'd been planning to play it himself. And astonishingly, Richard does really look like he would have accepted Dorset back. His initial proclamation about Henry's allies on the 7th of December 1484 includes a scathing attack on Dorset as one of the list of, quote, open murderers and adulterers and extortioners. But by June 1485, a further proclamation condemning all of Henry's allies doesn't mention Dorset at all.
So what has he heard?
Yeah, does he think, actually, maybe I will be able to get Dorset back on side, which would be a coup for, like, making it clear, no, I haven't usurped my brother. Look, all of his family are now back on side.
And also he might be thinking, well, Dorset's been in Brittany with Henry. I mean, he's surely got some information about Henry's plans.
Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, for Dorset, the idea that Henry Tudor was the right man to support must have looked ridiculous. He had no particular reason to follow him beyond self-preservation, and Richard was holding out an olive branch. Albeit one on which you didn't want to look at the olives too closely. And so, Dorset sets out for England and is almost immediately captured again. Now, as you mentioned in Roger Machado's cameo, there's every chance that it was faithful old Roger Machado who betrayed him to Henry, considering he received a nice little payment from Henry later. But Melita Thomas has another theory. What if Dorset did all this on purpose? He didn't really want to return. He'd prefer Henry to win. But in case Henry didn't, he could always tell Richard he was trying to return.
So he had a little word with Machado saying, I'm gonna run for it. Give us a day's start, and then come and get me and bring me back.
Because he was captured incredibly easily. Like, he was travelling very slowly. And it's also worth pointing out that, like, he wasn't actually locked up in a cell after this. He was just sort of, stay there or I can keep an eye on you. I can believe Dorset thought this. I can also believe that he didn't tell Henry this plan in advance. Because it's clear that Henry never really trusted him again.
Yeah, it's quite a sensible move, though, isn't it? I will look good on both sides. Oh, damn, I forgot to tell the other side about it.
Yeah, and now I look bad on both sides. Just remember this stuff when we get to Amphiboly.
Right, yes.
So, he was made clear he couldn't go home in case he blabbed all of Henry's plans to Richard, either willingly or with the help of enhanced interrogation.
Enhanced interrogation, yes.
Yes. So for a while, it wasn't clear what role he was going to play in Henry's plans. And then a perfect opportunity arose. You see, Henry needs money for the invasion. Anne de Beaujeu was willing to look the other way when Henry invaded, but she wouldn't provide much support. Oh yeah, she promised to loan him 40,000 livres, but only actually delivered 10,000. So Henry needed to make up the shortfall, and he turned to a rich French banker, Philippe L'Huillier, who would provide the remaining 30,000 livres, but only if Henry pledged all of his belongings, and as that probably wasn't much, if he'd leave 2 of his men as collateral.
Now let me think. Who am I going to leave?
Well, at this point, Henry threw an arm around him and said, oh, don't worry, monsieur. I am going to give you the most important, the highest ranked follower I have. You don't want these earls. You want a marquis. And so, Dorset spent most of 1485 not fighting in the Battle of Bosworth, but being locked up in France. In fact, this wasn't just any prison, because as well as being a banker, L'Huillier just happened to be the captain of the Bastille.
Oh, so he was actually a prisoner in the Bastille?
He was in the Bastille! So, there he was, without a revolutionary mob in sight to help him get out, with only his fellow collateral to talk to. Which was Sir John Bourchier.
All right.
Though, fortunately, not the same Sir John Bourchier who'd been married to his grandmother, because the situation was tense enough as it was.
I wonder what he'd done to deserve to be left behind.
I don't know. I mean, the Bourchiers are quite in with the Yorkists as well. In fact, the Sir John Bourchier, who was married to Dorset's grandmother, fought on Richard's side of the Battle of Bosworth. Although he did survive. So, Dorset remains in the Bastille until Christmas. Henry does pay for his upkeep there. So, it's not, he's not actually, like, chained to the wall. But it does mean that he therefore misses Henry's coronation. But he does get home before his sister Elizabeth of York's wedding, early in the new year.
Nice.
Because even royal weddings can't avoid family weird, awkward family reunions. Trustworthy or traitor? Henry VII's reign begins tentatively for Dorset. He and his mother do get pride of place at the baptism of young Prince Arthur. She is godmother, and he's one of the ones carrying the baby's train.
Baby has a train?
Yes, well, yes, in the sense of the big long cloak that he's wearing, not like a toy train. But that would be, I'm sure the baby would like that a lot more. He gets his lands back, but none of his royal offices. And those lucrative marriages he'd planned for his children, yeah, that's not happening. The marriage rights to Anne St. Leger, heir to all those lovely Exeter lands, disappear. And she'd eventually marry George Manners' Baron Ross. Incidentally, their eldest son would marry a granddaughter of Sir John Paston, the younger brother, because everyone is related. Yes. And as for Edward, now I have a special friend, Plantagenet, the Earl of Warwick. He wasn't going to be allowed to marry anyone.
No.
He was sent to the Tower which Dorset was definitely not Deputy Lieutenant in charge of anymore.
No, that would be... Yeah, I seem to remember we discussed that once, but we hadn't realised that he'd stopped being constable, or whatever he was.
Yeah, that was only until Richard came to the throne. So I think he was probably in charge of it for about a month.
But he could still put it on his CV.
But at least Edward Earl of Warwick is in the Tower. Or was he? Because in 1487, a chap pops up in Ireland claiming to be him. He even gets crowned in Dublin as King Edward VI. Is that we know him as Lambert Simnel, and Henry parades the real Earl of Warwick around to prove that A, he's still alive, and B, he's not in Ireland. But over in Dublin are the Earl of Lincoln, Kildare, Francis Lovell. I mean, this boy has got a lot of support. And Henry VII knows how this goes. He did it himself a couple of years ago. I mean, he's almost certain this slightly weird young man he has in the Tower is Edward Earl of Warwick. I mean, he'd never met him before. I mean, he might... Wait a minute. He was Dorset's ward for years. He'd know exactly what he looked like. Hey, Dorset, can I ask you a question? Dorset? Hello?
All right.
Dorset is halfway to Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk.
Is he running away again, or...?
Well, he claims he was just going to pray at the shrine of St Edmund to purge himself of his sins, which, to be fair, is something a lot of nobles do, especially if there's a threat of imminent invasion, and he might be called to answer for his sins in purgatory shortly.
And also it's quite a bit closer to the coast, isn't it?
Yeah. Or maybe he just wants to catch a plane. But, of course... As you say, if he went a little bit further, he'd be on the East Coast, which Henry is in the middle of fortifying, just in case Margaret of Burgundy wants to send some troops to help out her potential nephew. So Dorset is picked up by the Earl of Oxford and told, you've really got to see all the improvements we've made at the Tower.
Oh dear. So he's got to see it from both sides now.
Yeah, I wonder if he got the chance to catch up with the real Edward Earl of Warwick while he was there.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a story, isn't it? He's been in the Tower of London and the Bastille.
Yes.
I wonder if anybody else has done the two. I mean, what would be the hat trick? The Kremlin, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not even sure that's been built yet. That's good.
No, not quite.
No.
I'm just doing the Kremlin at the moment, doing Ivan.
I mean, does it count that he was in Sanctuary at Westminster Abbey as well, potentially?
Yeah.
So, Polydore Virgil reports that Henry did this out of an abundance of caution, assuring Dorset they didn't really think he was an enemy, but wouldn't it be better for everyone if he just stayed safely in the Tower? Which certainly sounds like something Henry would have said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and his little fingers clenched. But again, was Dorset involved? So realistically, it would have been a pretty foolish move. If this rebellion had worked, the new regime would hardly have looked favourably on such a continuous turncoat, and no one wanted the Woodville faction back in charge. But there are two possibilities that do make this more plausible. One is if Dorset really believed that Simnel was Edward. And this isn't impossible. If Dorset wasn't in London, he wouldn't necessarily have had the chance to see Edward for years. He could certainly have believed that he'd escaped from the Tower. Now, if this really was young Edward, that would be Dorset's way back to power. Remember, Edward had lost both of his parents before the age of 3. And he'd spent the ages of 3 to 8 as Dorset's ward. So Dorset and his wife Cecily were basically the only parents he'd ever known.
Well, we discovered that absolutely nobody really knew young Edward. Either they'd never seen him or they hadn't seen him for years, and children change a lot over these years.
Yeah, but genuinely, I mean, yes, there's a big change maybe between 8 and 12, but honestly, people who would be most likely to genuinely know Edward would have been Dorset and especially Cecily, his wife. If he played his cards right, he could have been in an even better position with King Edward VI. This one, not the real King Edward VI that's coming later, than he was expecting to be under Edward V. He could be a major royal favourite. I mean, he might even bring back the idea of the young pretender marrying one of his daughters. And then there's the other option. The one which, the more I did these episodes, wrote these, prepared them, the more I came to believe. Dorset doesn't really do thinking.
Right.
He is buffeted back and forth by whatever seems like a good idea at the time. When his mum's around to tell him what to do, he does all right, but left to his own devices, yeah, I'll just go to Bury St Edmunds. I'm sure no one will think that looks suspicious. Oh, there are all these troops on the road.
I suppose he's been the son of the king. He's not used to the idea that he has to explain himself.
So, once again, he's locked up while a vital battle of the Battle of Stoke, in this case, takes place. In fact, locked up in an iconic prison.
Perhaps it's a survival technique. Oh no, there's a battle coming. Right, what can I do to get myself locked up? I'll run away again.
He'll have heard the rebels were crushed, and his half-sister Elizabeth York is finally crowned. Neither he nor his mother are allowed to attend this coronation either. Looking for a legacy. In 1492, Elizabeth Woodville dies. Her oldest son, now in his late 30s, in fact, her only surviving son, probably, unless Perkin Warbeck is one of them.
Don't go there.
No. Arranged a fairly minimal ceremony at Windsor Chapel, and she was quietly buried alongside Edward IV. Now, this had been due, supposedly, to her last wishes, which was for a very humble Christian funeral.
Yeah, but they say that, don't they? I mean, Maximilian said, knock my teeth out before you bury me. I don't think you wouldn't have wanted it, really.
The fact is, like other Dowager Queens before her, especially ones that are not mothers of the new king, Elizabeth Woodville had been eased out into a convent at Bermondsey Abbey. Her money and lands taken away. I mean, strictly speaking, her lands had always been owned by the king. She had very few lands actually of her own. I mean, to be honest, probably the only reason she wasn't accused of witchcraft, like Joan of Navarre, Henry IV's second wife, had been, is that Richard III had already done that to her, and King Henry VII probably didn't want the comparison.
And also, do you want your mother-in-law to be a witch?
Well, I mean, remember that, Henry V had done it to his stepmother.
It's true. But it's not a good look, though, is it?
No.
Because then you'd think, well, like mother, like daughter?
Dorset could have paid for a more lavish affair, but he probably didn't want to draw too much attention. Though he did pay 40 shillings in alms for the poor himself, which not even Henry could complain about. And that's not just charity, although that is, a good thing. It's also, of course, generally these alms are handed out to poor people who come to the funeral, so it's a good way of getting a good crowd of mourners.
Yeah.
His sister, the Queen, Elizabeth Woodville's oldest daughter, didn't even attend, though she was in confinement. She was about to give birth.
She hadn't been allowed
The other daughters did. Yes. A couple of years earlier, Dorset's uncle Richard, the last Earl Rivers, had died, leaving his holdings to Dorset, and it must have been another moment to take stock. It was clear now Dorset was never going to have the level of influence at court that he'd aimed at. He was on the King's Council, and Polydore Virgil had called him a good, prudent man, which does sound like damning with faint praise.
In other words, which one was he again?
Yeah. But all the others were given the more important jobs. I mean, he'd stayed entirely out of the Perkin Warbeck affair. He'd learned his lesson there. He was allowed to assist with putting down the Cornish rebellion, and he is the Marquis of Dorset. He is technically the highest ranked person in that area. But even that was something of an insult, since, yes, despite being Marquis and a former Lord Warden of the Stannaries, he was completely subordinate to Oxford and Dobney in this. And they were, an Earl and a Baron. In fact, there are some biographies that claim he commanded part of the troops, but Melita Thomas couldn't find any record of that, so she theorised maybe he commanded the rear guard that never saw any battle, which absolutely tracks with his life.
Well, at least he didn't find a prison to hide in.
Yes. Oh, yes. All right, we'll give you some soldiers. You can stay with them in Taunton. Don't move. Don't use them. Don't... Again, it's the nearly man. He's nearly involved in putting down the Cornish rebels, but not quite. Henry also ensures his loyalty by pardoning him for some vague offences in 1492. But as part of this, he makes him enter a cripplingly huge legal bond. Any whiff of treason, and he'll be forced to hand over most of his manors. Oh, and Henry's also taken the marriage rights to Dorset's heir, Thomas Jr., and asks for £1,000 for it up front, and another £1,000 if young Thomas wasn't married by age 19. And young Thomas is about 15 at this point. Dorset probably felt a strong sense of déjà vu. Now, to be fair, he was far from the only noble that Henry tied up in this way.
Yeah. Even Dobney.
Yes, and it would have been more of an insult, actually, if the money amounts had been less, because, again, it depends on rank.
Yeah, a bit like Julius Caesar saying no, I insist you demand more for my ransom.
But it's notable that by going after his money rather than his person, Henry's managed to get around the fact that most of the family wealth comes from Cecily. Because thanks to coverture, Dorset owns her wealth. So all the money and manors would come from Cecily's belongings. So that was something that Richard never managed to do. Unable to make his mark publicly, Dorset turns to his own private estates. Cecily, his wife, had made extensive renovations to Chute House in Devon, which was her childhood home, turning it from a medieval hall into a Tudor manor, and Dorset seems to have been inspired by this, so he not only started renovating Groby Hall, which was his old family seat, but he began building a new and rather beautiful place in Leicestershire called Bradgate Hall, which was going to be a residence fitting for the Grey Line. He spent Christmas 1499 there. It might have been a bit drafty, as another source I have claims it wasn't fully built until his son's time. But I suppose, they don't start building all the buildings at once.
No, it's not as if they put up one wall and then go on and do something a different one. It's probably got a room to live in.
Yes. His heart, however, was always seemed to belong to Astley Castle, his childhood home, because his will indicates he wished to be buried there in the collegiate chapel of his Grey ancestors. And indeed, although Bradgate would become the main Grey family residence under his son, Astley was willed to Cecily in her own right, in the hope that she'd spend her dower years there, and then, presumably, eternity with Thomas in the chapel. So speaking of Cecily, we need to spend a moment with her. She'd also lived a life surrounded by drama, though during Dorset's life, she generally managed to keep out of the worst of it. So, Cecily Bonville Grey's grandfather, Richard Neville, that's Warwick the Kingmaker's father, because her mother was the Kingmaker's sister, he was killed in the Battle of Wakefields, fighting for the Yorkists, of course. Also in that battle were killed her father, William Bonville, her grandfather, William Bonville, and her great-grandfather, William Bonville, did fight there, but did avoid being killed.
So 3 generations of Bonvilles were fighting in the same battle.
Yeah, and they were all called William. She was 2 at this point. 1, actually, I think. Her father was 21, her great-grandfather was in his late 60s or early 70s. It's all doable. Meanwhile, her great-grandfather, William Bonville, lasted until the Second Battle of St Albans, where he fought for York, but reportedly stayed on the battlefield even after Warwick the Kingmaker ran away, because, being the old chivalrous knight he was, he wanted to make sure that Henry VI, who was, remember, on the opposing side, was safe. That no harm had come to this poor man who was clearly, not even fully aware of what was going on.
What a nice man.
Yes, I know. So when the Lancastrians arrive, they find William Bonville and one of his fellow knights guarding King Henry 6th. Unfortunately, when Margaret of Anjou arrives, she's less sentimental and has him executed because he was fighting on the other side.
It is not the time when she asked her son what she should do with them, is it?
Kill them.
Killed them, Mummy. Killed them.
Perhaps later on, Cecily and her husband bonded over losing a family member at the Second Battle of St. Albans, albeit on opposite sides. But to be honest, she was barely 2 years old at that point, so she wouldn't have remembered any of them. So as far as she was concerned, all the Bonvilles were essentially illustrious ancestors who'd brought her a vast inheritance.
Yeah.
So she had grown up in the household of her mother's second husband, Lord Hastings, who she'd probably thought of as a father. And of course, Hastings' first name is William. Because her mother clearly had all the family linen monograms, so just needed to cut out a few stitches out of the B to turn it into an H.
So, yeah, Hastings, eh? Okay.
Yeah. And actually, her mother and stepfather got on very, very well. So, I mean, whether or not Hastings did have extramarital affairs, he does seem to have loved his wife, and he only married the once.
But it was so different. I mean, most women probably expected that to happen.
Cecily was married at 14, but there's every chance she didn't live with her husband until age 16. I cut this discussion from the last episode because I wasn't sure at the time, but I've checked again, and the Paston letters remark in 1477 that she's given birth to a son, and they probably would have remarked earlier if she'd given birth any earlier.
Yeah.
So, that's good. Astonishingly, even after her stepfather had his head cut off, Richard III was completely humane to her family, granting her half-brother the title of Baron Hastings and allowing her mother to keep all her land.
Do you think it was a spur-of-the-moment thing, and then as he walked away, he thought, oh, God, what have I just done?
He probably realised that, young Baron Hastings, who was a child, was much less of a threat.
And if you start going after other people's children, he had a son of his own at this point, didn't he? So
he did. Yes, Edwin of Middleham is still alive.
Yeah.
Well, I say he had a son. He also had a couple of illegitimate ones. But other than that, her life seems to have consisted of all the typical duties of a local noblewoman. Communicating with tenants, settling disputes, running the household, and managing her increasingly large number of children. She had she had somewhere between 12 and 15. It's a little hard to be sure. 11 of them survived to adulthood. So that's pretty good going, this period. If she was annoyed at her husband's philandering, or frustrated by his absences at court or in various prisons, doing a tour of world prisons, she left no record. And considering the number of children they had, far more than was needed to ensure an heir, I really, really hope that she found his company at least pleasant, because there's only two possibilities there, and I like to think that she liked him.
I don't get this thing about they obviously didn't get on because they didn't have children, or they obviously really loved each other because they had lots of children. It was a transaction as much as the marriage was, wasn't it?
It was, but I feel really sorry for her if she had that many pregnancies and they didn't get on. I think that there comes a point where they've had loads of sons, they've had loads of daughters. It would be relatively easy for them to just go, is that enough? That's enough.
I've got a headache.
Yes. She also did choose to be buried beside him, despite marrying again after his death.
Well, that's hard on the second husband, isn't it?
Yes. Her second marriage was a younger man who upset her family and spent all her money.
Oh, we're back with a pool boy, are we?
Yeah, we'll get a bit to him. That might have been an unwise choice.
Right.
The world turned, kings rose and fell, but Cecily Bonville Grey, Marchioness of Dorset, took a far more sensible path than her husband. She stayed out of the way on the family estate and got on with things.
Yeah, either join a convent or just stay on your estate and keep your head down.
It seems that by the 1490s, her husband had finally realised the wisdom of this. However, there were family traditions to maintain. His children are reaching marriageable age. And more importantly, his heir, young Thomas, that there might have been older sons, but if they were, they predeceased him.
You'd assume, well, unless the older ones were called Thomas as well, you'd assume the one called Thomas would be the older one.
And of course, young Thomas is getting close to 19.
Oh.
And if he isn't married, they have to pay £1,000 to the king. And he will
He's got that written down. He's got an alarm set for that one.
So there's some evidence that young Thomas, I have to keep calling him this because his name is also Thomas Grey, and he will be the second Marquis of Dorset. So yes. There's some evidence that he was married, or at least engaged, to Eleanor St. John, the half-niece of Margaret Beaufort. So definitely a match Henry would have approved of. There's apparently no record, apart from one mention in the Dictionary of National Biography, but there also isn't any indication that Dorset had to pay a huge fine in 1596.
So he must be married to somebody.
Yeah, clearly something was worked out. But if the marriage ever took place, the sad likelihood is she died young. Because young Thomas will marry a completely different woman after his father's death, by whom he has most of his children.
Right.
Only most.
Okay.
But we'll get to that in his episode, because he's definitely having one next series.
Okay.
Our Dorset's oldest daughter, Eleanor, who may once have been intended for Edward, now I have a special friend, Earl of Warwick,
Right.
was married off to Sir John Arundel. Now, this is a good match. He's a scion of an important Cornish family.
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say they're the Cornish lot. Yes, we've come across them. Everybody marries an Arundel, it seems.
yeah, building up that power base in the southwest. He'd actually become very important, but, becoming the collector of money for Henry VII in that part of the world. But sadly for Eleanor, that only happens after she dies as a young mother of 4.
Oh.
She does outlive her father, but only by a couple of years. And then in 1501, he just manages to arrange a couple more marriages, though we do mostly know about them from his will, which will give you a sense of what's going on here. His daughter Mary, despite being only 10, was married off to 13-year-old Walter Devereux, Baron Ferrers. Not the same Baron Ferrers as daughter, well, a different Baron Ferrers. However, before we get too alarmed by this, the will specifies they were free to break it off before, quote, carnal copulation.
What other sort of copulation is that?
Yes. Or if they dislike it. So this is more like an extra formal betrothal. They're married, but they're not living together. There's nothing of that going on. Not least because they're both too young to marry in that way. You know, he's under 14, she's under 12. In the event, the marriage actually lasted, and we know their first child wasn't born until she was 22.
Oh, good.
So
that's not a bad age.
No. And indeed, pretty successful, that marriage. Her great-grandson, incidentally, and therefore our Dorset's great-great-grandson, was Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, who leads a pretty exciting life at the end of Elizabeth I's reign.
A favourite.
Yeah, well, a favourite for most of his life. Yeah. Finally, he gets his daughter Cecily engaged to John Sutton, the 3rd Baron Dudley. Now, we'll definitely be covering him next series, or maybe the one after. He becomes known as Lord Quondam, former lord, Quondam meaning formerly, because he ended up losing all of his family wealth and estates to his cousin, a certain John Dudley, son of one Edmund Dudley.
Okay.
But that's another story.
Yes, we don't want to get in the Dudleys if we can avoid it.
Yes. And there's one more famous name to drop here. So he sends some of his younger sons to study at Magdalen College, Oxford, and they particularly take to one of their tutors. They were lucky, actually, because this man, although he'd been at Magdalen, he only actually taught there for 6 months, because he was a very ambitious priest by the name of Thomas Wolsey. Now,
yes.
Here he is.
Yes. I'd forgotten about this bit. Yes, Wolsey was their tutor.
So Dorset invites this up-and-comer to Bradgate Hall during Christmas 1499, which is why he knows they were there. We know they were there. And he, according to Wolsey's biographer, gives him a benefice in Somerset, possibly the first one he gets. I mean, spending time with the man, Dorset could have seen the energy radiating from him. If he's patron to Wolsey, I mean, Wolsey will do anything to get ahead. Maybe this will be the chance for Dorset to get back in the game. You know, as he's going into 1500, he can see a path towards a new era in his life. Maybe he could even be a great Renaissance patron of education. He was only in his late 40s.
I can hear a however coming on, though.
He had so much time. In September 1501, Dorset died.
Do we know of what?
Nope.
Just
Nope.
died of
well.
death.
Yeah, he died of death. He was in London, and there's a lot of stuff going around in London. He did leave bequests to Oxford and Cambridge in his will to pay fees for poor scholars. So, you know, you can see where he might have been going. He was indeed buried in the chapel at Astley, and he left a will which was generous, particularly to the poor of the parish who attended his funeral. So you remember he gave out 40 shillings in his mother's funeral. At his own, he left in his will 100 marks.
Oh, right. I was going to say 40 shillings isn't as much as Henry VII paid for that demoiselle who danceth. But,
yes, indeed.
But she wasn't paid 100 marks.
Yes. His will also left bequests for a lot of prayers. A lot of wills in this period do this. Again, we'll probably look at this a bit more in her son's episode next series, but when his wife dies many years later, she leaves in her will that a lot of prayers will be said for her, and I'm paraphrasing, as soon as possible, which rather implies she thought she'd be in a rather hot part of purgatory. She lets her hair down a bit after Dorset dies. Also, he makes a real effort to provide dowries for all his daughters. So that comment about carnal copulation in context is actually to make it clear that if the marriage ends up being annulled because it doesn't go through, that Mary will get a proper dowry for another marriage.
Right, yeah.
Unfortunately, all of this needs to be drawn from the bewildering number of manors that he and his wife and now his son own, and gives his executors work for years. It also causes something of a rift between his wife and his son, the new Marquis of Dorset. Though this probably wasn't helped by Cecily following another family tradition, and a year after being widowed, she marries a younger man, and the younger man in question, Henry Stafford, younger brother of the Duke of Buckingham. Editing David here. So I knew this was going to happen at some point with all of the family trees here. I made a mistake. She did not marry the younger brother of the former Duke of Buckingham. She married the son of the former Duke of Buckingham. He was the brother of a Duke of Buckingham because, of course, once Buckingham was executed after Buckingham's rebellion, his elder son then becomes the new Duke of Buckingham, and his younger son is the one who marries Cecily. So, just to clarify, she's marrying the son of the man who executed her husband's family, not the brother. Does that make it better or worse? I'm not sure, but it certainly makes him younger. Oh, and incidentally, this also means that because of them having Woodville parents, she is actually marrying her first husband's first cousin. Oh, why can't these people just find someone else to marry? Back to the show. I mean, no wonder her son was alarmed. He was just old enough for one of his first memories to be Buckingham arranging the execution of his uncle and great-uncle.
So what's the age difference?
He was about 19 years younger than her.
Right.
So, yeah, when she married him, she would have been in her early 40s, and he would have been in his early 20s. So, there's a lot of drama in that family. But again, next season. But at the end, it does seem that both his son and his wife look back on Dorset rather fondly. His wife most definitely didn't want to be buried with her second husband, who was rather a wastrel. In fact, she doesn't even mention her second husband in her will.
Not like Catherine Gordon, who didn't mention her first husband.
Yeah. And in her will, so her husband, Dorset has been buried in the chapel of Astley, and she calls for a goodly tomb to be made in the chapel of Astley over the said Lord Marquis my husband, and another over me, next to each other. And she would get this eventually, although in her son's will in 1530, a year after she dies, he is also asking for this tomb covering to be built, suggesting that they didn't exactly get on with it.
No.
Or that might be a little snipe about the fact that his mother didn't make him one of her executors, even though she made a lot of other people executors. And again, wait till next season. But finally, the tomb covering with alabaster effigies of both of them, of Dorset and Cecily, was placed in Astley Church, and he and Cecily could lie peacefully together for all eternity.
And we got something else to talk about next season as well.
Except, no, we're going to talk about it now. Thanks to a series of events involving Dorset's great-granddaughter, Jane Grey, being briefly declared queen, the Astley estate had passed into the hands of Adrian Stokes. Stokes had absolutely no emotional connection to the place. You know, he'd married into the family and then everyone had died. So he looks at this chapel and thinks, I don't know any of these people, but I know what I do want. I want that lead off the roof. So he strips the lead off the roof in 1558, pulling down the spire in the process. So it turns out you put lead on church roofs for a good reason.
Yeah, no, I assume this was going to be a Henry VIII issue.
No. Funnily enough, it gets through the sad thing is it gets through the Reformation. But 40 years of rain leaking in results in 1600, the remaining tower of the chapel collapses. And when people come to pick through the rubble, they would have come to the double tomb of the first Marquis and Marchioness of Dorset. Cecily's effigy was a little damaged, but still recognisable. Thomas's had been obliterated.
Oh, bless him.
And they would have been right next to each other. The tower fell with pinpoint accuracy. One last time, he'd almost made it. Yeah. But not quite.
No.
So that is the sad story of Thomas Gray, the first Marquis of Dorset.
That he was in a Shakespeare play, so...
He was, and indeed, both of our quotes at the end do come from that play, though neither of them are from him.
And he was played by Robert Downey Jr. in the Ian McKellen version.
Oh, wow.
So,
oh, well, that's got to give you something for...
Yeah, even I've heard of Robert Downey Jr.
But we'll come to that in a moment, because now we have the ratings. Okay. So first...
Amphibole.
Amphibole. Intrigue. How good was he at intrigue and plots?
Ooh. Well, if he was setting himself up as being able to go on to call on both sides when he ran away in Brittany... You know, he'd obviously thought it through and thought, well, yeah, it'd be a good idea if I run away. Then Richard will think, you know, I was trying to get to him, but really I've told old Rog there to come and get me. What he hadn't thought through was, I really ought to mention this to Henry before I go. So even if he has amphibolized, he's missed a major bit of it out. He's nearly amphibolized.
Exactly. He either doesn't do it at all, he never does intrigue amphibole at all, or he does it but he's really bad at it.
No, does that count? I mean, if you do it but you're not good at it, I mean, it's still amphibole, I suppose. Yeah. You've made the effort.
I mean, yeah, he's definitely, you know, he definitely tries to rebel. He definitely, you know, gets involved in things. He's definitely sort of passing messages. He's never quite the person in charge, but he's definitely doing something. It's not like he's just sitting around doing whatever he likes. And, I mean, he certainly was quite tactical with marriage alliances, albeit not all of them worked out.
But I think that's probably the case in all families.
Yeah. I'm not saying he's going to get much.
No.
But it's my episode, so you should go first with the score.
Yeah, he deserves some because he's...
Yeah.
Yes, mind you, it's hard not to amphibolise at that time because there's so much going on that you have to be aware of and think, oh, well, I'm going to be in trouble with that side if I do this. Or, but not a lot. I'll give him 3.
3?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am inclined to be similar. I think a 3 is fair. He does it. He's not very good at it.
Yeah.
Antiperistasis.
Antiperistasis, rise and fall. Did they rise, plummet, or just sort of bounce around? Well, I mean, let's recap.
It's quite a bouncy time, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's recap. He starts son of a knight, who's hoping to become a baron. He ends up an almost prince, an earl, a marquis. He could have been a duke. He could have been a prince. At another point, he's a traitor, an exile, a prisoner. And he goes back to being a marquis.
And he's a very good prisoner. He picks some good prisons. Yeah, I mean, that's a real up and down.
Yeah.
It's inevitable at this time, isn't it? Because you've got a complete change of regime, so you're always going to go up and down or down and up.
I mean, multiple times. I mean, he was stepson to one king, half brother to another, half nephew to another, and half brother-in-law to another.
But he doesn't do any of it, though. I mean, he's...
Yeah.
Yes.
He's pushed around.
Yes.
It's not that he's doing it.
Well, he's lugged about by his family.
But then again, I suppose, does that matter in this? The round is only, did he rise and fall, not was he responsible
Did he make
for
any
it?
effort to do it? Yeah, I think he's... I mean, obviously, he hasn't come from nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a 6. Why not?
Yeah, I know we keep agreeing, but I agree. I think he's not... I think if he'd done that much bouncing, but had come from a little lower down, I might have gone for a 7. Or if he'd managed to ever get a dukedom. Or ever have any real power of his own.
Yeah, or ever done anything.
Martyrdom.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this one. I mean, he suffered.
Yeah, it doesn't count, we've decided. It doesn't count. I mean, you can suffer for all sorts of reasons. We've talked about him already. Richard Grey suffered, but it wasn't martyrdom.
I mean, the one place where he might have been doing something for, like, a greater cause is how much we think he was fighting early on in the right of Edward V.
Yeah.
Rather than himself.
But what do we think? Do we think he was going for Edward V, or do you think he was sort of pushing his own... I mean, again, he's hoping to be dragged along by his family, isn't he?
Yeah.
So if the family's doing well, he's doing well.
It's one of those things where you can say he does that and the Buckingham Rebellion, because of his brother, but I can't help think, yeah, but which brother? Is he doing it because he's in the rights of his brother Edward V, or Richard, Duke of York, or is it because in revenge for his full brother, Richard Grey?
Yeah.
So there feels to be like a lot of revenge, a lot of plotting, a lot of just trying to keep hold of his own power, but not much martyrdom.
No, I mean, he gave away a lot of money, but he was dead by then, so it didn't really matter to him. I don't think I can give him anything for martyrdom.
No, I think I am going to give 1. And the reason I'm going to give 1 is I kind of almost believe the whole sort of, okay, I'll be in prison for you twice, Henry, just to avoid causing trouble.
Yeah. Well, I think 1 is it's a good one because it's a sort of almost martyr, isn't it?
Yes.
18.
So this is posterity. Well, this is the problem when nothing ever quite works out. Almost every member of his family is more famous than him. Yes, he's in a Shakespeare play. Yes, he was played by Robert Downey Jr., but it's not a great role. I mean, he's not got a huge number of lines, and as I said, when we come to the Shakespeare quotes at the end, I actually chose 2 other characters talking to him because they were better lines than any of the ones that he has.
And from what I remember from the film, I can't remember his character from any other version, not version, but any other rendering of Richard III than that one. I seem to remember Robert Downey Jr. being stabbed through a mattress when he was having a little liaison with somebody, and somebody was lying under his bed and stabbed him through the mattress. And from what you said, that's not what happens to him.
That definitely didn't happen. No.
So
no.
Yeah. So it's not really him, is it?
No, they amalgamate a few things in that film. I think I must get around to watching it. It's supposed to be an excellent version, but I know that for example, they combine together, say, Margaret of Anjou and the Duchess of York, Cecily, which would have annoyed both of them, I think.
But, furious. I'd be furious the play wasn't about them.
He's mostly what he appears to be doing in the play is being annoyed with Hastings and then comforting his mother when, she's lost her sons to the Tower in a very sort of, oh, yes, but God knows what he's doing kind of way, which his mother is not having at all. So yes, that not a lot going on there. Right. Robert Downey Jr., according to IMDb, played Earl Rivers.
Oh.
Not Dorset. Yes.
Oh, there. So he was nearly Robert Downey Jr. It has been a while since I watched that film.
Yeah. I was amazed they hadn't cut the part, to be honest. It's just I haven't seen it. He was Wolsey's first patron.
Yeah.
According to one biographer of Wolsey, but he's nowhere near as significant as Henry Dean, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sir Richard Nanfan.
No,
Van.
and also it was largely because he had him as his tutor for his kids, wasn't he? I mean, he wasn't so much a patron as an employer.
I mean, honestly, yes. I mean, you would never have used him to the extent that, say, them, or indeed Richard, just let me die, Fox did on his way to the court. But of course, what he does do by being a patron to Thomas Wolsey is he begins one of the great chains of Thomases. So you have Thomas Grey, who becomes patron, albeit briefly, of Thomas Wolsey, who is patron to Thomas Cromwell, who is instrumental in bringing in Thomas Cranmer. Yes. So you get...
And no doubt we'll be able to extend that later when we get into the season.
So, it's something. And he does do the renovations and the new building of the family estates. Most of them are ruined now, but the ruins are very impressive.
Yeah, I like a ruin, yeah.
Yeah?
It's not a lot though, is it, really?
It's not.
No. I'll give him 1 for not being Robert Downey Jr.
I like a good Tudor renovation, so I'll give him a 2.
Okay.
But that's one for Tudor renovation and 1 for Wolsey cameo.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because we're just doing an episode on Wolsey before we go to the next season, because it's going to be so massive. We thought we'd do the Henry VII bit of his life first. So I've been reading about the link there from Wolsey's angle.
And to be fair, for his minimal use in Shakespeare, I mean, that's not necessarily an indication of anything. Margaret Beaufort doesn't even appear in Richard III. Although she is mentioned a couple of times. So...
Yeah, no, he's I think 3 is probably ample sufficiency.
Yes. Okay.
Flaunt a bleeding flaunt.
So, flaunt to flaunt, portraiture. Would you like to know what Thomas Grey looks like?
Yes, I really would.
So would I.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this first picture you sent. Yes.
Yeah, so...
The periwig gives it away a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, a couple of things on this. I mean, obviously there was an effigy, but it was crushed by a falling tower.
Yes, but not Cecily's.
When he was in France, we know one of the errands he sent Roger Machado on was to pay £2 to his painter. But if there was a painting of him or a family portrait or anything like that, it hasn't survived.
Perhaps it was his painter and decorator.
Yes, could be painter and decorator. That's true. So yes, I have got a few, and I'm showing you first some later images of him. I have got one that is contemporaneous, but you will see why it's an issue in a moment.
Right.
So yes, we start with an engraving that claims to be of him as Wolsey's first patron, but it's the fashions at the very earliest. This is the early 17th century.
Yes.
He looks like Oliver Cromwell.
He does.
This is just not going to happen.
No.
Followed up with that, one thing that painters do like to portray is Elizabeth Woodville. Now, normally when they're painting her, they're doing her like saying goodbye to her sons, like her royal sons. But apparently this next one by John Opie from the 18th century is her kneeling to Edward IV when she's begging for him. I don't see any oak trees around.
Oh, so he's one of these sweet little...
He's one of the sweet little doe-eyed boys that she is begging either side of. And in fact, I'm sure some of these paintings are misattributed, because there's one by Fragonard where the caption says it's her saying goodbye to her sons before they go to the tower, but she only got to say goodbye to one of her sons before they went to the tower, so that might have been her begging before Edward IV as well.
And the younger one seems to be in his nightshirt. And we know that children were dressed up as little adults, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think they're showing off, look, I'm really good at cloth and folds.
Yeah. That's just these weird, because again, this looks as if it's somehow taking place in the 18th century.
Yeah.
Also, everyone is very dark. The more I look at this one, the more I think this has been mislabeled. It is, because, you see, like, people around her and, with scrolls. It looks much more like actually begging for her sons not to be taken to the tower, but regardless. Next one I've given you is Ernest Board's very pre-Raphaelite painting of 1923, which supposedly depicts the coronation of Elizabeth Woodville, or possibly the wedding, although I don't think the wedding was anywhere near that grand, because it's supposed to be in secret. And you can see there are 2 small boys holding her train who must surely be her sons.
Yes. Nice little pudding basin haircut.
Well, at least by this point, painters are starting to go, you know what, if we're doing something in the medieval period, people should have medieval fashions. So that's probably a bit closer to what they looked like. And then, of course, I've included the actor Leonard Gregory playing Dorset in his one appearance in The Shadow of the Tower
Yeah, I've
from
just sat through the
1972.
whole of The Shadow of the Tower, which I must admit I came round to and ended up being very impressed by it, even though I had complete contempt for it at the beginning, largely because of the hair. I don't remember him at all. So
He is only in one episode, apparently, and mostly it's just him being dragged off during the Lambert Simnel affair.
in the Lambert, yeah, I do remember the Lambert Simnel one. I don't remember him being. Well, there we go.
Yes.
I think that says it
Again.
all, doesn't it?
Yes. But I scoured, I looked, and finally, I found that there is a French history of Britain from the early 1470s, the Anciennes Chroniques d'Angleterre by Jean de Wavrin, and they were illuminated. So this is a time when Dorset was actually alive, although it's another depiction of him as a child because it's a depiction of his mother's marriage. Though this one looks a bit more like it would have been because it's kind of, hidden. It's only a few people in a cloister.
I haven't got this one.
No, because I'm about to show it
okay.
to you. Because I want your first reaction. So this is our only contemporaneous picture of Thomas Gray.
So this is definitely what he looks like.
Probably. He's one of those two in the bottom left with his face behind a pillar.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's the spitting image. That's exactly what I thought it looked like. I can sympathise with this because when I used to be part of a ukulele group, there was always photos of gigs we did, and I was always behind somebody else. I never appeared in any of the photos. Maybe I'm a vampire, I don't know. But I never appeared in any of the pictures. So, yeah, I can sympathise with him there.
Ironically, one of the things we might be able to tell about him is probably not true in this painting, which, as you can see, everyone in this painting has got brown hair. But Elizabeth Woodville was famous for being very, very beautiful, and one of the things that was assumed to be the most beautiful in this period was that you were a blonde. And we also know that his son was blonde, because Thomas Gray, the second Marquis of Dorset, had his body taken out of his coffin at one point soon after he died, and someone remarked that he was 5'8", had a broad face and yellow hair.
Does your hair yellow to death? I don't know.
So there's a reasonable chance that our Thomas Gray was broad and blonde. But apart from that, this is the best we've got.
Well, we haven't really got many pictures of him as an adult, have we? I mean, most of them. He's not himself, is he? He is the little appendage of his mum.
If we're going to be strict and say we need a picture of him at the time,
Well, we don't
it's
go
a
for that.
zero.
We go for interest. I mean, I think we've given points for action figures before. I mean, there's a lot of variety.
there is. But isn't it? It's weird how it's always of him as a child. As if that was the most important part of his life.
Yeah, I mean, the princes in the tower have the excuse that they were killed soon after, but he actually grew up, had
Yes.
children of his own. I'll give it 2 for variety, but the fact that only one of them is actually more likely to look a bit like him, and we can't actually see him, is...
Yeah. I'm going to be more harsh than that. I'm going to go for 1 simply because none of them tell me anything about him. It's like, I feel that, like, sometimes if you've got an action figure, it's like kind of, well, that tells us about how they are received and how they are. But every one of these paintings he's a bit part in someone else's story.
I think that's the bit it tells us about him, really, isn't it? That he's seen as a child and not as an adult, as if he never grew up. He's one of the... he's Peter Pan.
Yeah. You've taught me round. I've gone up a mark because that is exactly right. He deserves another 2 there. A 2 there. So he has a grand total of 26.
Ooh, well done.
Which, I mean...
We've seen worse.
Yes. But it doesn't always matter. We have to ask the final question.
Are they too delicious, or what?
I'm sorry, Dorset. You're. I'd like to say you've nearly won, but I don't think you have.
Such a pity. There were so many chances where he could have been. But I do feel sorry for him.
I don't think it was necessarily his fault that he wasn't. It was just he was his family, and his family didn't win in the end. Well, his sister Elizabeth did.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if he'd have actually had a much happier life if his father hadn't died, if he'd stayed essentially a regional baron for his entire life.
I think you could say that about everyone in the court, can't you?
Yeah. You know, just because he actually seemed to do his best when he was just on his estates sorting things out.
Yeah, I mean, really, what was he meant to do?
Yeah.
He was not. He was in the council, I suppose. He was meant to do that. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Dorset. It's not happening.
It's not happening.
We can't have the next one because there isn't. We've run out now.
Yes. So I'm not going to be doing nothing. I've got some
Homework.
cameos. I'm going into the Muslim world for a couple of cameos, and then I have. I may well also be doing our next Patreon person. So Patreon voters, dear darling Patreon voters, if you could avoid doing what you've done to Lucy the last couple of times and choosing someone who's going to need 6 or 7 episodes,
It's not Ivan's fault. We're doing Ivan Moscow, by the way. It's not his fault. It's the fact that we've got to start from scratch. I mean, I've gone right back to Alexander Nevsky, which is quite a way back, because I need the sort of run up to explain what's going on, and also I need to explain a bit of Russian geography, and it's just.
So what we're saying is, please choose someone Italian.
Yeah, Italians only next time.
Tune in next week, because next week is, astonishingly, the 200th episode of Tudoriferous, and that will make it your 200th episode, Lucy.
Blimey. Gosh.
And we have something rather special and, what's the right word? Extraordinary.
Yes.
Coming.
Or as after one of our ukulele gigs, somebody said, well, that was interesting. So you have to have the pause.
Yes. Normal service will be resumed the week after. So that is the end of our episode on Thomas Grey, 1st Marquis of Dorset. We hope you've enjoyed it and will join us for that remarkable next episode. But thank you for listening.
You can find us on
Tudoriferous.wordpress.com. Email tudoriferous@gmail.com. We're on Podbean and all the usual platforms. Also Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
And on Discord.
Meanwhile, O Dorset, speak not to me, get thee hence. Death and destruction dog thee at the heels.
Good counsel, marry. Learn it, Marquis. Goodbye.
I'm glad we ended on a high rather than on that one. Goodbye.
Everybody knows what a duke is, an earl is, a count is, a prince, a pope or king. Everybody knows where they stand in the court, in the land, in the joust, but here's the sting. What about me? Where do I fit in? All by myself with a title of my own. What is a marquis? I'm not okay with this. Sounds a bit foreign to me. Marquis, is it Swiss? I want something more homegrown. Everybody knows what a son is, a brother, a nephew, a mother, or an aunt. Everybody knows their position, where they're placed, where they sit, what they do and what they can't. But what about me? Where do I fit in? My place in this family's a little hit and miss. I'm the king's stepson, practically the only one. How do you pronounce it? Is it Marquis, like the tent, or Marquis to rhyme with kiss? La 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 dum 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 dum.